order. And welcome everybody to the Department of State Treasurer. Please join us in our Pledge of Allegiance and our salute to North Carolina flag. I'd like to ask Tom Collins to lead us in this as one of our veterans.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the old North State
Love, loyalty, and faith.
Thank you. Morning, Charlie. Treasurer. With that, as a reminder, if anyone wishes to make a public comment, please sign up on the public comment section with Patty. Patty, you and your staff, thank you for all you do to make this jump up on the table today. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted online with other on-board materials. Other board materials. We ask that you mute your phone if you're not speaking, and we'll take roll call on any votes. And without objection, anyone who makes a motion or second to a motion will be considered a yes vote for efficiency purposes. Hearing no objection, if you must leave the meeting at any point, please announce your departure and announce your return as well. These items must be recorded in the meeting minutes. And finally, please state your name before speaking. And with that, Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Here.
Charlie Cruz,
Present.
Lorraine Johnson,
Present.
O'Neill McRee,
Present.
James Richardson,
Present.
Bob Shea, Raj Singh,
Present.
Steve Bean,
Present.
and Robert Hillman. Present.
Thank you. Before we go into our next agenda item, I'd like to welcome Treasurer-elect Brad Reiner, who's hopefully has had his fill of meetings this week. Council of State, State Board of Education, something else. Good luck, Government Commission. This one, about 5 other ones. So as you, everybody knows, this is my last opportunity to chair this meeting. So I appreciate Treasurer-elect Reiner being a participant in all this. Finally, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce James Patterson. We'll go up here and do our ceremony. Okay. I said Patterson. No. You're still James Richardson.
I remember why.
Yeah.
You're replacing Greg Patterson.
You're replacing Greg Patterson. So it wasn't a total slip of the tongue. So if you raise your right hand, place your left hand. So, Charlie, I get to swear at you too?
Yes, sir.
Now you go to bed.
Yes, sir.
All right. You, James Richardson, solemnly affirm that we support, maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and you will faithfully discharge the duties of your office as trustee. Something. I do. Congratulations.
Don't tell my friends in state Carolina that I got blue here on.
Well, I think we have cameras here. So. James went to state. So.
That's true. You're okay, you say.
You, Charlie Cruz, solemnly affirm that you'll support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States, the Constitution and laws of North Carolina, and not inconsistent therewith, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of your office as trustee of the supplemental. Whatever you got.
I do.
All right. James, we'll give you an opportunity if you'd like to say a word or two, and as well as Charlie.
Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to join the board. And I'm looking forward to this. I was very impressed with the orientation, so looking forward to learning a lot more about the system and ways that I can help in any way.
Thank you. Charlie?
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to be here in person this morning and just appreciate the opportunity to do this important work. Had a wonderful 30-plus year career in North Carolina. Have had the great privilege to work with Dale and many members of the team for a long time. It's been a good, positive relationship, and the work of this board and what we're doing is important, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. So thank you.
Charlie, as some of you know, was many different roles and has over 30 years, but I guess the last one was Director of OSBM for the state. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Was that the last one?
That was the
So far.
state budget director. Yes, sir.
State Budget Director, and it's, when you've seen one treasurer's office, you've seen one treasurer's office, but also things can get confusing for the citizens because we have an OSBM director, we have a controller who's appointed by the governor, and then we have the state treasurer who's elected by the people. So that's how all that works. And with James, James is a graduate. He was appointed by President Pro Tem Berger to replace Greg Patterson. James is a graduate of North Carolina State, private wealth advisor with Richardson Private Wealth Advisors. Brings over 34 years of experience to the SRP board. And I will tell you, as someone who annoys others by handing them things that I think will interest them, when you occasionally take a publication of pensions and investments from me, you could just very well see yourself on this board. So you probably,
I did not know that.
that's where it all started. So glad to have you here and your expertise.
Thank you, Joe.
And with that, we'll move on to our Ethics Act. Ethics and identification of conflicts of interest. Please take a moment to review the agenda. Does anyone have an actual potential appearance of conflict of interest regarding matters that are Sorry, I've pretty much been up all night, so not sick, just tired. Hearing none, should a conflict arise during the meeting, please let me as the chair know.
Excuse me, Dale.
Yes.
That one, James Richardson again. That one, I think that on mine, they said potential conflict of interest mainly because of the profession that I'm in.
Sure. So noted. In the appendix, you'll find the SCI evaluation for James Richardson. I want to thank all of our folks who are in the compliance part of the treasurer's office, as well as folks in Daryl Malcolm, and the President Pro Tem Berger's office, as well as other individuals at the Ethics Commission who've made sure all this goes through properly. The Ethics Act, SCI evaluations in your materials requires that any conflicts or of interest that are identified in the evaluation be recorded in meeting minutes. So the evaluation letter will be made part of today's minutes to serve as a periodic reminder of those conflicts which have been identified. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Adoption of a resolution in support of Greg Patterson as a member of the Supplemental Retirement Board of Trustees. Greg is also someone that I did not know, and as well as James 8 years ago, but he's been a faithful member of not just this board, but other boards. And without our thoughts and our prayers are with Greg Patterson in this resolution. Do I hear a motion to approve the resolution honoring the work of Greg Patterson?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Aye.
Charlie Peruse,
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson,
Aye.
Lanier McRae,
Aye.
James Richardson. Aye. Raj Singh
Aye.
and Robert Hillman.
Aye.
Thank you all. Next is the approval of meeting minutes, and James, this goes both ways. Occasionally, some people recuse from voting on minutes where they weren't part of the meeting. So that's your choice, but, so do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 22nd?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer
I'll just
Falwell.
note that my name is misspelled in one place.
Excuse me?
My name is misspelled in one place. It's not a big deal, but it's McCree is spelled with two C's later down in the document. So if that could be corrected, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Charlie Peruse.
So let's go back. Steve, just amend your motion to approve it, giving staff any
Yes.
opportunity to make technical changes.
Yes.
And our second, okay?
Charlie
We'll
Peruse.
take care of that.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
But I was not present at the meeting.
But she was a member.
Yeah. Lanier McRae.
Aye.
James Richardson.
Aye.
Bob Shay
Aye.
and Raj Singh.
Aye.
Thank you. We're now here for our legal update. Reed Chisholm, Assistant General Counsel.
The board has 10 policies that are employer or participant facing, adopted those several years ago. Staff takes a look at those as it does with all the policies at least once a year. Fourth quarter, we look at these policies on that cycle. With the governance policies, those will be reviewed in the first quarter. After reviewing all 10 of the policies, staff does not have any recommended changes. There were two very minor changes to one of the policies that don't require voice. But if there are any questions about the
Vote, no votes necessary. With that, we now turn the floor to Christy Farley, who is our communications manager for the state retirement plan for our annual strategic communications plan review.
Yes. Thank you very much. So this year we set out to educate, empower, and engage employers and participants. You can go to the next slide. We had very steady outcomes this year. The next one. We had some very steady outcomes, even though we ran into some challenges around the business of migration to the Empower platform. Our participant focus was strengthened as we revised the quarterly newsletter. You can go to the next slide. And we increased our social media campaigns, webinars, and events. Our employer focus really saw some strides in employer contributions, and we had a record high of 556 employer contributions. And I'm sure Empower will talk about this later, but employers are really making strides in their benefit offerings to their employees. Next slide. One thing that we did this year is we actually took over, normally the website was hosted with Empower. We took that over and put it on the myncplans.com website. This really gives us more control over content and the timeliness of the release of information. Just in the short period of time, we haven't even reached a full year at the time of this slide. We already have a 30% increase of unique visitors. So that's pretty impressive. We also added Orbit, which is the online retirement system for members. We added a tab for the NC 401k and 457 plans, just giving us another opportunity to reach members who may not yet be participants. Next slide. In 2025, there are some key things that we need to focus on. These are our annual goals. We want to increase plan adoptions and employee participation, increase savings contributions, increase asset retention, and continue to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of communication. This year, we have some amazing opportunities, especially with the expansion of eligibility for the 401k. We need to drive enrollments specifically for those part-time employees as well as new hires. Right now, we really have less than 50% of new hires that actually enroll in the plan. So we have a great opportunity there. Next slide. The other thing that we have identified is that we have some gaps. And if we do a gap campaign to incite that action to close the retirement readiness gap, I think we can see a great deal of movement. We have, starting, with the 65 plus, we have 7,000 participants who are almost there. And if we can just push them over the edge, I think that we'll be able to help the entire population become more retirement ready. Next slide. And the other thing is we need to start the conversations that drive the outcomes. Our existing campaigns are good. We have really positive engagement and outcomes, but they're just steady. We're not really seeing any action up or down. So I think that we need to revise and rethink our current campaigns to incite action. We need to diversify our topics and focus on those new employees and overall enrollments. And that is my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions from those that are joining us virtually? I can't see you.
Yes.
Your comment about 50% of the new hires joining, is that been substantially higher or lower in the past? You know? Is that what it's been?
I don't know. I think it's probably pretty steady, but Empower may know a little bit more.
That's consistent.
Other questions? I think I'm on the right track. That participation rate, when you compare it to our other customers who work for the local system, is about half. The Eldridge folks, probably because of the 401 and 457 match that they do, their participation rate is about twice as high as the state employees. And that's why, as part of our legislative agenda this year, we were not successful. We were trying to get a $25 match. And people said, why bother? Well, $25 million, as Charlie will tell you, is probably $128 million a year. I mean, $25 match per state employee is over $100 million a year in money. I picked $25 because we have to start somewhere, number one. Number two, I think that when we talk about retirement readiness, and no disrespect to anybody in this room, but a lot of people that we're talking about mostly make less money than we do. So I never wanted it to be a percentage of income because that just rewards people who make what I make, for example. So I just wanted to start with $25. We were not successful doing that, but I think if they ever light up a match for state employees, even at $25 level, I think this participation rate will go up dramatically. So, which is important. So, all right. Okay. Anything else? We're next to our administrative update. Michael and Matt, Jody, welcome.
Well, good morning. Today it's going to be just the Mike and Jody show. Matt's listening online.
Sometimes the smile on your face doesn't reflect some of the complaints I get about Empower. So I just want to get the Delta straight before we go forward here. And it's real. I mean, people don't call it. We're not their first call. I mean, so I hope that you will really address some of the things that we're dealing with as far as complaints about customer service.
Sure, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here today. Christy, all the work that we collectively work on the communications to drive engagement. We want to hit a quick hit update on third quarter. What we really want to do for our update today that Jody will go in deep on is the reaction to Hurricane Helene, what's going on the western part of the state, and how we're trying to help both employers and participants in that part of the state. As I dive into my comments today, I just wanted to take just a quick minute, Treasurer Falwell, to just thank you for the past 8 years. As I was preparing for today, I went and pulled the board report from your first meeting.
I just found that the other day on my desk.
Did you? I thought
The desk was so well preserved. What are you
So I thought it'd be
I saw your desk. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
I thought it'd be interesting to
I gave it to the treasurer-elect, so I'll be honest.
my desk. So I thought it would be interesting to just share your first board meeting when you first attended one of these meetings. Total plan assets was at 9.77 billion. We're now at 17.89, so an 83% increase. Total unique participants have increased from 267,000 to over 317,000, so a 19% increase. The average monthly contribution rate has increased from shy of 180 to now 296, a 65% increase. And the average participant account balance has increased from 36,500 all the way up to 56,342, so an increase of 54%. I think it's a lot of all the work of all of the board members, the new board members, the prior board members, and staff to really help us stay laser focused on all of the goals that we have to try to drive those quarter over quarter. But I just wanted to just acknowledge that, and also I've noticed myself kind of incorporating your other sayings in other areas of my life. That if you don't mind, the top three that I've always enjoyed is measure.
You're out of order. It's not a roast. This is a board meeting.
But it's measure twice, cut once. Keeper of the public purse. I use that at my house with keeper of the family purse. And then what I really like the most is when we do get into those tough conversations. When you say focus on getting the why right, will allow us to figure out the how. So again, just thank you for your commitment, your leadership, your stewardship. It's been an interesting 8 years from my perspective, sitting here and observing all of it. So just wanted to say thank you to that.
You had hair when we all started together, didn't you?
You should have seen it too. For my comments today, I'm going to start on just the summary slides. I really want to make sure I devote time for Jody to go deep on the Hurricane Helene response. If we start, Patty, on slide 4. These are our key metrics in terms of, sorry, Patty, slide, the next one, slide 4. So I think there we go. So these are just our key metrics, looking at the key things in terms of money in, money out for contributions versus distributions, average month participant balance, active participation rate, and active average employee deferral. All of those look really healthy. The contributions versus distributions and how that is more money is going out than in, that is not unique to North Carolina due to the baby boomer retirements. We see that across literally almost all of our statewide relationships right now. So we want to make sure that gap's as low as possible, and that fluctuates month to month. But that is pretty typical for what you see in large seasoned state level plans. And then on slide 5, total unique participants with a balance continue to trend ever higher. Loans is consistent. And then total enrollments. We are almost at the end of the year. I won't steal our thunder for the next meeting, but we believe it'll be our second best year ever. So when you take into account the migration of platforms this year and all the effort that came with stabilizing that, we still had a really good year in terms of driving new members into the system this year. And then on slide 6, we have all of our goals. We're exceeding all of our goals. We've also, since we've come out of migration now, picked up activity in terms of adding new employers into the system. or helping employers with what Christy referenced, either to add or enhance their employer contribution, which, as the treasurer mentioned in his comments, so greatly helps with driving the active participation rate. Before I turn it over to Jody, I'll just speak, Mr. Treasurer, to your first comment. We strive every day to provide the best customer experience. There has been bumps in the road since migration. We do, though, as those instances come up, we try to address those. We're not perfect by any means with over 300,000 members in the system, but the goal is always first call resolution. And sometimes we don't hit that mark. Overall, with calls into our call center, though, everyone is surveyed on those results. Same thing with Jody's team. We still do have, most of the time, great results, but it just takes that one phone call into your office to just, impact the overall impact of what's really going on. So we hear you loud and clear. We work closely with Jeff and his team whenever you guys do get that feedback to make sure that we're quickly reacting to it. And if we see opportunities where we need to do additional training, education on the plan rules, or have tough conversations with associates that just misinformed or gave out incorrect information, we are quickly doing that. So, definitely do not want those calls coming into your office, but know that when we get them, we are very urgently working through those issues to see what's going on and to try to get it resolved. I can't promise that we're going to be perfect, and I can't promise that we're not going to make mistakes, but when they do occur, we will not stop till the matter's resolved. Yep.
Thank you for your comments. And I've been working with you also and on all kinds of issues like retention and developing the notion, as we've done to all of our participants. We've challenged them to say that if you do it cheaper elsewhere, then you should. Chances are they can't. So just getting them to think about the fact they can leave these assets here for the rest of their life.
Yep. So that wraps up what I would like to say today, unless there's specific questions for me. Again, welcome to the new board members. Looking forward to working with you. Treasurer-elect, looking forward to working with you. I'd now like to hand it over to Jody to give the update. For those of you that are new, Jody leads all of our dedicated groups throughout the state that work closely with all of the employers and then all of the participants on plan level education and participant level education. Jody's team is really the heart and soul of what makes these plans work every day, with getting people enrolled, helping them to make good educated decisions on how much to defer, helping them with questions on their investment allocations, and then when they do separate from service, making sure that they understand all the options that they have, the benefits of staying in plan. So really that whole participant life cycle is what Jody's team does each and every day.
We've got a great team. Good morning. Nice to see everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Our team, just as an FYI, we've got 18 folks on our team who are spread geographically across the state. So they're here in the state. They each have dedicated territories and are working with both state and local government employers, boots on the ground, and doing a great job. We've got a lot of tenure on our team, so very happy about that. As Mike alluded to, I think the place to start with an update today is with our response to Hurricane Helene and the historic impact that has had in Western North Carolina. Of course, we've all seen the news and the pictures that have emerged from Asheville and Boone and Banner Elk and other places. So it's not lost on anybody in this room, I'm sure, as to how significant of an event this was on September 27th for those who awoke to an awful situation. That was a Friday, you may recall. By Monday, it was abundantly clear that we were going to have tens of thousands of folks who were impacted by this, but obviously some more severely than others, but that we needed to have a response. And I want to applaud the staff here at DST for recognizing that immediately and requesting a meeting Monday morning with our team to begin to talk through the response to the events that were still unfolding at that point. We really still didn't know what we didn't know. Um, that was fortuitous. Another thing that was very fortuitous was the last board meeting, as Reed and I were talking about earlier, the adoption of the qualified disaster response distribution option that was on the agenda and approved last board meeting. Who knew? Who knew then how vital that would be for so many of our folks? So after that call on Monday morning, where we kind of rallied the troops and said, okay, what can we do? How can we smooth this process? How can we be responsive? How can we provide that level of service in the most efficient, effective manner, knowing what folks are dealing with there in the western part of our state? Our client service team, which is led by Aaron Coble and Mary Conti, worked tirelessly to fast track the internal process that had to occur to get that QDRD process set up. It was on track to be set up later in October. They fast tracked that so that we could actually have that out there and available for folks who might need it. They also worked to secure temporary exceptions to certain policies and procedures to make the distribution process more expedient. That included things like waiving the express delivery fees for distribution checks. It included things like finding a workaround for temporary addresses. A lot of people found themselves displaced as a result of this, and their address of record was not necessarily where they were at that moment. So, coordinating that would have been a bit of a challenge for folks, but our team found ways that we could work through that so that it wasn't delaying things. They expedited hardship withdrawal processes wherever possible, and they also established a secondary process for ACH. Folks who normally, when they go submit their ACH information to us for an electronic deposit, sometimes the data they send and the data that's on file doesn't sync, and that can cause a delay in the ACH hitting their account in a timely way. So our team found a workaround for that in order to, again, not delay things. They also made sure that the call center that Mike alluded to a moment ago was properly informed of all of the distribution options. There was a lot of coaching that went on around that, and they had the appropriate talking points so that they could thoroughly review with any participant all of their options. Then, in addition to the communications that came out from DST, our team of local counselors reached out to all of the impacted employers personally. That was done via email because phones were down. So there was no way to call into the area for a lot of our employers. So they reached out via email and gave really specific instructions for employers that could be passed along to their employees. They also alluded to the special page that Christy had set up on the My NC Plans website. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful resource for both employers and participants to be able to think through and look at what the different options are for accessing these funds if they find themselves in a financial crisis like so many did. From an engagement perspective, nearly everyone in the area was without all the basic utilities for weeks. That meant internet service, phone service, power in many cases, water, that sort of thing. So as you can imagine, all of the events and activities that we had scheduled got canceled. So conferences that would frequent the Asheville area or out in the Cherokee area, they were canceled on us. And the fall is a big time for a lot of our conference activity and our sponsorship activity with those type of events. So they got canceled. Of course, any on-site events got canceled and that sort of thing. And really, those are just beginning to reemerge. And I would say even just within the past week or two. So I actually talked to our counselor who is based in the Asheville area, Deborah Rapetsky, on my way to the area yesterday, and I said, and we're talking frequently, but I said, give me an idea as to what you're hearing when you do talk to the participants. What are they saying? What are employers saying? And Deborah basically surmised it to say that people are still concerned with just living for today, just getting through today, making sure there's shelter and heat and all of the things that we probably took for granted here in this part of the state yesterday. So City of Asheville was only recently able to get potable water to their citizens. In places like Avery County, they only recently, like within the past 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks, have gone back into in-person learning for the schools. Many daycares and childcare facilities remain closed. So that impacts, of course, the workforce, as you might imagine, in that area. And of course, our counselors have heard heartbreaking stories about what some of our participants have gone through. One of our participants in Rutherford County lost 21 family members. And you think that's not even possible, is it? And those are the kind of things that they're hearing. Another one worked with his wife through a medical crisis where she couldn't get dialysis for almost 2 weeks. So these are the things that are occupying the minds of our 100,000 plus participants in the impacted area. Initially, FEMA declared 28 counties as disaster zones. By mid-October, that number had expanded to 39. So 39 out of our 100 counties in the state are FEMA declared disaster zones. Now, that certainly helps the folks in those areas because they can go through the QDRD process. But that means, 40% of our counties and a large chunk of our plan participants were impacted. It also meant that 358 employers were in that area and had impacted employees. So as of this week, 13 employers, 13 of those 360 employers, 13 employers are still behind on their payroll submissions. We are working with them to help get them up to speed, and we have confidence that will work itself out. We also have processed 905 QDRDs. That's that's less than 1%. As Jeff pointed out yesterday, that was less than 1% of the impacted population there. Now, I will also sidebar and say, I think that we may see an uptick in these because people are just now kind of figuring out what insurance will cover, what FEMA will cover, and where there may be gaps. So interestingly, there was no spike in October in the loan requests, new loan requests for the plan. So again, we're watching those numbers. And of course, we'll report back to you in February at that board meeting to let you know what we've seen, since developed since fourth quarter started. But those are some things that we're expecting. We're trying to move in that area at the pace that our employers will allow us to move. So we recognize the importance of retirement readiness and preparedness and the education efforts, but we also recognize what the reality is for everyone in that region. So I hope that things continue on the road to recovery for folks in Asheville and Boone and Sugar Mountain and Banner Elk and Mount Mitchell and all these beautiful areas, as I know all the other North Carolinians do too. But that kind of gives you a little bit of a glimpse into how the storm impacted the folks in this plan, our employers in this plan, and how we're trying to respond to it. And I'll just pause there and see if there are any questions about that information.
We'll go online first. Any questions online?
This is Lorraine. I don't have a question. I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, and particularly, for those of you who are new to the board, after, uh, doing what I could to get in contact with my family and my friends out there, and I'm not ashamed to say just plain crying over what I was seeing on the news and how that entire part of the state was impacted, and the reality of what was happening for people on the ground. Pretty quickly after that, I started, I was thinking about our responsibility as trustees to make sure we were doing what we needed to do for folks out there. And I knew that that meetings would be canceled, that people would not be able to access, that it could be a disaster for people also for whom we have a responsibility. And it was very comforting to me to know without a doubt that the treasurer's office and everyone we worked with, you as a prime example would be all over this. I wasn't worried at all about any delay. I knew that you would be working hours and hours and hours as soon as you possibly could to make sure that we were doing everything we possibly could to take care of our obligations to the, to the plan participants. So, and of course, I was glad that I knew that as a board, we had also taken care of the responsibility for that disaster preparedness um, rules that we had put in place. I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but I knew we had done what we were supposed to do and more. But more importantly, that everything that needed to be implemented at that point was being implemented. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you, Lorraine. Any other that are joining us virtually who have a question or comment? Okay. How about those in person? Yes, sir. Bob.
I just have one. Out of the 13 that you're trying to get back online, is there a common reason why they're behind?
In terms of submitting payroll.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a combination of technology or personnel not being able to get into the office. Those are typically your like really small little entities where you've got like one, the person that does the payroll does multiple other efforts, and it's just priority and how they get through everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
I'd like to recognize really staff as well as the partnership with Empower, because as Jody mentioned, what started out to be a Monday morning brainstorming session to figure out what we could do. A lot of work came out of that. Thank you guys for stepping up the way you did. Staff drafting up FAQs, right away, Christy getting them up on the website, creating the web pages. And there was just a lot of effort that went on from staff, as well as our partners at Empower. So I just want to thank everyone for all of their efforts and the countless hours that they go on behind the scene that people don't see.
Thanks, Jeff. In the essence of time, I'll just say that the engagements are strong for third quarter. There's detail beginning on page 34 of the board report, and they're consistent with what we've done throughout the year and in prior years. So certainly if you have questions about that, I'm happy to address any of those figures and detail information that you see there.
Hearing no other questions, just a couple of comments, mainly for not only you, but the treasurer-elect. when something like this happens, there can only be one governor at a time. There can only be one president at a time, period. And having 37 or 39 of our 100 counties designated as an affected area. I live in West Forsyth County. Our lights never flickered. Our trees never went down. So whoever's in charge of designating a place as an affected area needs to tighten up their filter a little bit, because what that results in is people who literally cannot flush their toilets and do not have food and water and heat, looking at a place like Winston-Salem and saying, why are they on that list? I mean, I believe it's demoralizing when you have so much carnage in some of these areas and then have other counties on this list who never got impacted. And so I hope that, God forbid this ever happens again, that somebody will ask the tough question that needs to be asked. Why is this county on this designated area? Because the fewer counties that are on a designated area, the more resources we can put into those counties. Number one. Number two, as we talk about the coordination with local government, state government, federal government, I did this a week after this. We cannot forget the importance of the U.S. Postal Service, which no one was talking about. Now, the United States Postmaster lives in Greensboro. So I called him and his comms people. Within 48 hours, they had dropped 1 million pieces of mail into those designated areas within 48 hours. So a lot of our folks in rural North Carolina, we have technology, we have all these other things, but their connection with Raleigh and with their retirement system is through the U.S. Postal Service. So another thing for Treasurer-elect Briner is that, God forbid this happens again, when they start listing these people who are, quote, coordinating, don't forget about the U.S. Postal Service. Because whether it's a death certificate, a retirement paper, a withdrawal, a loan, a lot of that obviously can be done with this, but this U.S. Postal Service is very important. Those are my only comments about that. Anything else?
No, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Paul with Galliard. Bill, present the third quarter report on the stable value fund.
Good morning, everyone. Treasurer-elect, staff, and board members. Again, my name is Paul Angaki. I'm your client relationship manager for the state of North Carolina Stable Value Fund, managed at Galliard. And with me, I have Galliard's president, Mike Norman, and to say a few words and say our departing wishes to Treasurer Falwell.
We don't use departing. You'll learn that when you get my age.
Apologies.
Well, you look like you're my age. Right, Steve? All right, go ahead.
Stick foot out of mouth.
All right.
Well, first, most of you know we're a Minneapolis-based money manager, and I just wanted to thank all of you in the room for bringing nice weather that you have here today. It makes us feel like home. So thank you to all of you for having a nice, cool breezes this morning. Secondly, as Paul alluded to, Treasurer, thank you. I heard it was your last meeting. I wanted to make sure I was here to say thank you for all the years of your service and guidance of the plans of North Carolina. We've been a part of it for your whole run. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you and your team to bring the optimal solution. So thanks for all your guidance over the years.
Thank you for getting your crediting rate over 300 basis points eventually. So.
Certainly trying. We're making some good headway on that. But so let me give you just a couple of quick thoughts. We'll flip the page to page 4 here, just who we are, and I'm going to let Paul do all the heavy lifting as he normally does, but just to give you a couple snapshots. Most of you are aware we're a fixed income only shop for institutional assets. It's fixed income and stable value. The number that you're seeing there on the screen, about $82.7 billion, is down slightly this year, primarily to as our Empower friends have alluded to, there's been this mass exodus out of plans, as well as I'm sure you've seen in your plan as well. A lot of plan participants have their risk-on mentality with the raging stock market, which you can imagine being the stable value shop at the other end of the end has seen the fair share of assets being transferred out as participants look to top tick the equity markets as humanly possible. Sometimes it happens as part of the transition. So down just a little, but that's pretty consistent from what we've seen across the stable value industry. And we'll talk about your cash flows in particular in a moment, are not unique to what we've been seeing across our broad book of business. As we kind of flip the page into page 5, happy to report it's a page of just names. Doesn't mean a lot, but I wanted to let you know that it's the same names that you've seen for quite a length of time. That's good news from the money manager. We have had really good stability of the team at Galliard, and we're firing on all cylinders. Our fixed income management that powers the underlying drive and working towards that 3% crediting rate and above has been in full force over this past year. So we're working very hard on that. As far as anniversaries go, I wanted to say happy anniversary to all of you as well. This week marks our 14th year working with your plans in the state of North Carolina. I remember working with Reed 14 years ago to get the contracts hammered out. So it's great to work with all of you over that amount of time. It also marks our 3rd year anniversary of my parent company, Allspring Global Investments. It's their 3rd year anniversary of inception. Happy to report that it's all systems go there as well too, as that's been coming online, and we continue to get good support from our 1,400 person global investment management oversight firm that works, and they've been able to really allow us to have more power to bring you what we do on a day-to-day basis. So that's been very, very well as well. Beyond that, I'll stop there. I'm in time unless anybody has any questions at the firm level. Perfect. I'll give you a couple thoughts off script. It's not in the book, but give you a little set the stage for Paul, just since he's nice enough to drag me along. So as most of you know, in stable value land, if you remember, there's really kind of 2 pieces of the puzzle. There's the underlying fixed income, which Paul will talk about with the different managers that we bring to bear, including Galliard Management. But then there's also the book value contracts that overlay the tops of those fixed income portfolios. Those book value contracts are what supply the smoothing crediting rate, the principal guarantee to participants, the ability for participants to transact at book value versus market value. So obviously those banks and insurance companies that provide those contracts, you have 5 of them, he'll give you the names here in a minute, are very important to make sure that they're healthy, happy, and that market is healthy and happy as well too, for the ongoing viability of the asset class. And happy to report that there's still 18 providers in the industry, which is good. Overall volume is up. We have seen a couple of partners in the space either retrench a little bit for some risk, and it's all kind of in different pieces. Like one insurance company wanted to pull back a little on their overall exposure. That has not overly impacted the capacity in the market space, hasn't impacted your portfolios, which we're pleased to report. No material credit issues or anything there. But the good news is, and I think the word to take from my comments here is that in my, holy cow, talking about kind of starting to look my age, 30 years of doing this, the capacity in the market space is about as good as I've seen it over the 30 years. So that's really good for plans. That helps us to help drive reduced fees and other things that we can do for your plan. And Paul will have some more on that as well too. So all good from the broader stable value level from my standpoint.
Thank you, Mike. Well, Patty, if we could turn to page 7, just give you a glimpse on, how rates are looking and kind of the news since we last met in August. The orange, if you look at that orange kind of light brown line, that's what's shown as the Fed funds rate. And since our last meeting in August, the Fed cut their Fed funds rate by 50 basis points in September. And November as well, which isn't shown on this page, they cut it another 25 basis points. So really, the range now for the Fed funds rates is about 4.25% to 4.5%. The 3-year constant maturity treasury line, you see that in that dark purple line, that also moved lower over the quarter. And really at the end of September, that number was about 3.58%. And again, moving in line as the yield curve has shifted lower over the last year and last quarter. And then finally, that dark green line, that U-shaped line, which shows Galliard's net of maximum fees crediting rates over their stable value separate account book of business, has continued to move up. And Treasurer, it is at 3.05%. Net of all fees as of September 30th. I did look as of October 31st, it's now at 311. So again, continually moving up in the right direction.
Coming out of the finish line, so congratulations.
No finish line, just halfway down the journey.
Another Falwellism.
Perpetuity.
Tell your kids to blow through the finish line. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the main message on this page is that, as mentioned in previous quarters, again, the stable value net crediting rates, they do follow the path of interest rates, but with a lag. But what we're seeing now is that they are converging. Okay. Next page, page 8, just a snapshot of some of the characteristics. Again, consistent and expected results, especially in this interest rate environment. And really upper left-hand part of the page, as Mike says, we just celebrated 14 years. Again, thank you very much for your continued faith in Galliard as your stable value provider. Assets pretty much flat over the last quarter. We saw outflows less than 1%, about 20 million, but that was offset by about 17 million in income, so pretty flat there. Lower left-hand part of the page, some different statistics that we saw quarter over quarter. Again, average quality book value, wrapper, credit quality still at A+. The underlying quality of the bonds at AA, consistent over the quarters, 5 wrappers, no changes there. The blended yield, the net blended yield did drop 3 basis points. But again, really, that's more in tune to participant flows than the underlying performance of the fixed income, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But as I mentioned, October 31st, we see it at 3.11 net of all fees. And I did look at kind of preliminary numbers as of November, and we're still inching up toward that 3.2 as well. Yield to maturity, again, as we saw yields come down over the quarter, given the Fed cut, we did see the yield to maturity of the underlying fixed income investments drop about 88 basis points, but still very strong, over 4%. Duration very consistent year over year and quarter over quarter. And again, one thing that we noticed when the rates did come down, yields did come down, we saw a big uptick in that in the market to book, because again, when yields go down, bond prices go up. So that helps that numerator of the market to book ratio. So we saw that almost increase about 3%, 2.91% over the quarter. To kind of give you, in looking at the yields as of 9/30, we see 4.38% for the underlying yield of the overall fixed income portfolio. Put that in perspective with a 3-month T-bill, that's about 4.73. And as I mentioned on the previous page, 3.58 for the 3-year CMT. So really numbers converging, as I mentioned before. Upper right-hand part of the page, fund assets really still around $2.25 billion. And looking at plan options, with information provided from Empower, we get that semi-annually. So as of 6/30, the stable value fund is the 5th most utilized option in the plan. And then lower right, just basically showing that, again, we're fully invested in the underlying fixed income portfolios. Any questions on this page? Okay. Looking ahead, next page, page 9, just gives you an idea of the book value performance. And again, this is what participants see on their statements. And again, these are net of all fees. And really, as I mentioned previous quarters, again, in line with expectations, really, with the interest rate environment. One thing that, is really interesting to note, and I'll go through it maybe a little bit in a few pages, but the underlying fixed income returns really is the engine for the stable value returns. And there's been some phenomenal returns that I've seen in fixed income over the last year, which I'll get into in a little bit. But really, again, the numbers here really are starting to come in line with that 3-year CMT, that constant maturity treasury, but really, looking longer term, 10 years and inception of, on this page, it's about 13.8 years, but really 71 basis points of outperformance of the underlying benchmark. One thing I mentioned before, a 3-year CMT is a approximation of a benchmark we can use. Again, there's no perfect benchmark for stable value because there's no way to fully replicate the book value smoothing returns. But that being said, comparable to alternatives, 3-year constant maturity yield, we are providing some added value over fees.
And I would say to those of you that don't look at this page every day, right, the question comes up, well, Galliard, why are you below your benchmark? Well, again, as we've all lived through the last 18 plus months, the inverted yield curve where the short-term rates are higher than longer-term rates. The trick, as Paul just alluded to, the book value returns that have the smooth return profile don't react as quick to the money market rates in the market space. So this is not surprising. The green blocks are what we're focusing on. It's the good consistency of the stable value performance, which is expected. But we understand that there's going to be times of dislocation. That's what we're living through right now as part of the inverted yield curve, because that is looking at the market value returns and pops a little bit more than the stable value. So.
Next page, page 10, cash flows. Really, the message here is that we saw outflows a little bit stronger in the first part of the year. We are seeing them taper off as of the third quarter. So again, no real difference in our stable value separate account book of business, in terms of outflows. That being said, it looks like they are tapering off as we close out the year.
And I would say looking across public entities in our book of business, you guys are on the conservative side, actually meaning less outflows. We have some accounts, even our corporate accounts, that have 15, 20% stable value outflows over the course of the year as they've seen kind of rebalancing of their book of business. So pretty consistent from the North Carolina standpoint.
Next page, page 11, just last 9 quarters of statistics. Again, upper left-hand chart shows the historical net blended yield or crediting rate. Again, moving up in line with movement of interest rates, but again, with the lag, as Mike mentioned, to that book value smoothing of returns. And again, that 305 as of October 31st at 311 now. Lower left-hand part of the page, duration, very consistent, quarter over quarter, year over year, basically at 3.3 years. Upper right-hand part of the page, as I mentioned earlier, with the Fed cut of 50 basis points in September, market value improved again as yields go down, bond prices go up, and again, you see that kind of inversion on the yield to maturity on the lower right-hand part of the page. So,
if I may, before we go to the next slide, on historical duration, given the extraordinary moves in shape and level of yield curve over the last couple of years, it's surprising absolutely no change in duration for you guys. Is that simply not part of the mandate?
No, it's a fantastic question. It comes to the stable value accounting methodology. So when we think about stable value, right, one of the 2 main factors that we think about stable value is 1, principal preservation, and 2, consistency of returns. And so when you look at how those mechanics work with those book value wrap contracts, there's three or four inputs, right? There's the book value, the market value, hence why the market to book value term is unique to get to stable value, duration, and blended yield of the underlying portfolio. So if you move duration around too much, so this is different than a typical fixed income manager that you might see in a pension plan. You want to keep your duration relatively consistent, because as you move that duration around, it pops your crediting rate one way or another because it amortizes quicker, because the math behind it essentially is the market to book value ratio. So 96.7, it's 3.5, 4 points is being amortized out over the life of the duration. If you move that duration around too much, you're going to see a pop one way or another to participants. And so that kind of all of a sudden gets kind of out of whack. So we try to keep it relatively smooth. You'll see most stable value managers really keep duration relatively similar.
And so you mentioned that we are on the conservative end of outflows. The ones who are on the more aggressive end, is that because they have a money market option?
No, where we've seen it, and typically, no, and you can have a money market option, right, that runs parallel. But it's unfortunately over my course, if I had seen this 25, 30 years ago, it's really kind of a contrarian index of people. I call it the USA Today effect, right? People coming in on the bus and they're like, wow, look at this Tesla and Apple's an all-time high. I want to get on board that bus. And so we see typically a lot of transition from stable value into more risk on equity type assets. What we've seen historically, though, over the market is the great retirement, as we were talking, Empire Crew was talking about earlier, and a lot of people starting to pull their assets from the plan to put them into IRAs and go down that path. So yes, the money market has an effect just because of the inverted yield curve as we've seen, but I think it's kind of muted somewhat, especially with the stock.
Anything else, Steve?
About that, we talked about this before, and Reed, you can comment, but we contractually, legally, we can't have a money market option in the stable value fund where people can just switch it back and forth because it's a conflict with the, because when rates went up a year or two ago, that was one of my questions too. We can't legally, that's correct, is that right?
Equity wash.
Yeah.
And that's actually a protection too that's put in place by the book value contract providers because it's chasing hot money, right? Disintermediation risk. And so if people are chasing yield as they come out of the stable value fund, then we have to generate cash for those participants to transfer. Who's left holding the bag are the other participants left in the fund. So we try to, the overall industry has that contractual obligation, the equity wash, as Reed mentioned, to make sure that people think twice about whether they just want to chase yield, which is typically a very short-term mismatch. This is, as we all know, we've lived through, congratulations everybody for living through the longest inverted yield curve in history. But
some of us lived through the other one too.
True.
I don't think anybody else here did, just me.
Well,
we're talking about 73, 75. So, anyway.
Next page, page 12. These are the book value wrappers that Mike alluded to earlier that are wrapping the stable value portfolio for the state of North Carolina. And you know, what we want to just highlight here, Transamerica is one of the manager or one of the wrap providers that is trimming their book of business. But really what I'd like to reiterate is that Transamerica remains committed to Galliard and our clients. One example of this is that we recently had a new business opportunity where Transamerica did bid on that business. So they are working with a couple other stable value providers to lighten up their book, but Transamerica is absolutely committed to Galliard, and no contracts existing with us have been affected or are still taking deposits. On looking at this, we did reduce our exposure to Transamerica at the margin in our overall book of business in those certain accounts where Transamerica was overweight following the announcement of their reduction. But most importantly, North Carolina was not impacted by this. We don't anticipate any significant changes to the allocation with the North Carolina Stable Value Fund at this time. But as the dynamics change and evolve, we will consider adding an additional issuer if we deem it beneficial to the fund. But at this time, we have no plans to do so. One last item to note on this page, Nationwide, one of your wrap providers, we have successfully negotiated that fee down to 14 basis points, and that should occur by the end of the year. So we should see that in the fourth quarter report. So again, moving fees down where we can through negotiation. Okay. Skip ahead to, let's flip to page 16, fee page. Another highlight to note from quarter over quarter. So the investment management fees paid to non-affiliate investment advisors, that is your external management fees. And as I mentioned over the last quarter, maybe the previous couple quarters, we were successful in negotiating lower fees with staff with Prudential and TCW. So we did see that overall weighted average fee move from 5.7 basis points to 5.4 basis points. With the movement of Jennison being replaced by IRNM, we should see that decrease further in the fourth quarter as IRNM is roughly about a couple basis points cheaper than Jennison. But again, moving in the right direction. So this page shows about a 1.5% reduction in overall fees. And speaking of the replacement of Jennison, if we could flip to page 18. And as I mentioned over last quarter, Jennison was replaced by Income Research and Management. That did occur in early November, and we should see that occur. We should see that highlighted in the next quarterly report. But as expected, with that transition in early November, everything went smoothly, and this successful transition really was attributed to the great work of North Carolina staff, our partners at BNY Mellon and IRNM. Highlights of that transition: all securities with Jennison were transferred in kind, and residual cash was moved over. On November 7th, IRNM requested minimal sales prior to transition. That was under 1%. When IRNM took possession of the securities, they repositioned the portfolio to their style. And they added allocations to agency mortgage-backed securities, commercial mortgage-backed securities, asset-backed securities, and structured government sector securities. And they fine-tuned the corporate allocation to reflect their best ideas in security selection. So if you look at this dial page that we have, we don't have IRNM listed, but if you want to see somewhat kind of how it looked, it kind of mirrors what Galliard looks like. The only difference is they have a little bit more focus on sector allocation, and that arrow would be basically pointing straight up. And their sector emphasis is really on credit, structured government, and multi-sector relative value. So again, everything is moved in process there, and we are moving, as I mentioned before, we're moving Jennison out of all of our stable value separate account relationships and within our flagship commingled within, our Galliard Managed Income stable value CIT as well. So again, doing that across the board, not specific to state of North Carolina.
Oh, could you just give a little more color on kind of why that was done for the was it performance related with Jennison, or what was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, what happened, I believe, is 2022. They had some turnover in their leadership, and we put them on watch at that point. We were comfortable with the explanations of that, but really what came to having them on watch to having them change from a recommended manager to an approved manager was really long-term performance. Some of the bets that Jennison had made really hadn't panned out over time. They do put a lot of emphasis on the shape of the yield curve, and making their allocations or whatnot to what the shape should be in their minds at what point. I mean, it just didn't bear fruit compared to our other external managers that we had higher conviction in. So that list of recommended managers went from 5 to 4. And all those, I believe, Dodge & Cox, TCW, Payden, and Rigel, and IRNM are the 4, which are all now in the North Carolina portfolio.
Thank you.
Other questions? That it?
Yeah, it really, the one thing I want to mention on page 20, as I mentioned before, the performance of the underlying fixed income vehicles. Themes of performance over the overall quarter. Again, overweight spread sectors, namely corporates, really added to returns. But when looking at the following pages, I won't go into each individually, but really looking at some of the returns, over the 1-year period, the Galliard short portfolio, let's say, 1-year excess return 97 basis points, had a 1-year return of 8.16%. The Galliard intermediate portfolio, 110 basis points of outperformance, 11.49% return for the 1 year. Dodge & Cox, 1-year excess return 128 basis points and 11.67%. So really strong fixed income results over the last year. And really that has benefited the portfolio to participate in those returns. So that was all I had. Just really reiterating the strength of the stable value fund really does come from the underlying fixed income investments.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Now to Elizabeth and Weston with Callan for a short update.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, I'll get us started on page 3 of 44 of the PDF, if you all would. And I'll just give a quick update of the market environment, what happened in markets over the quarter, and really what are influencing markets over the year. Sound like a broken record, and that strong returns for U.S. equity markets here in the third quarter after a disappointing start in July. Markets rallied the last 2 months of the quarter to show strong gains here. What we did see is we've talked about the Magnificent Seven and some of the narrow leadership that still is influencing markets, though over the quarter that trend did wane quite a bit. So we're seeing more broadened leadership, which we think is good for your active managers and probably better for the market overall as a whole to kind of pause on some of that concentration risk present in indexes. And then finally, valuations and small cap represent some potential good opportunity while the broader market is historically expensive. Small cap markets have not seen some of those gains over the last couple of years that larger cap stocks have seen, and so as a result, valuations there remain compelling relative to large cap. And then moving on to the next page, just a couple of highlights on global equity markets. Just one thing that really stands out here in the light blue, MSCI China return. China, as a country, the markets responded favorably to some stimulus there that actually brought kind of the year-to-date return or the one-year return to more of a positive footing for China. But that had been a challenge, and that had, I mention this because it did influence at least one of your active managers in the international space positively. Then on page 5, just real quickly, we heard about more interest rates here. Bond markets rallied in the third quarter as a result of the 50 basis point rate cut. Since this print, we've had another rate cut, and markets are all but expecting another rate cut here to happen towards the end of the year. So, I think since we've printed this and looking at quarter to date, longer end of the curve has started, and the belly of the curve has started to shift up, so that more normal yield curve has begun to take hold, which would be good for stable value and also would be more in line with expectations of what we've seen in the past. I'm going to jump to page 7 of 44 and just talk about the market values real quick. As of the end of the quarter, the total assets stood at $17.9 billion. This was about a $1 billion increase from the last quarter, so a very good quarter for participant balance, increasing by that $1 billion mark. On page 8 of 44, we show what the participant largely sees. So these are the options should you not choose to use the Goalmaker allocation services. You get to choose from the lineup of both passive options as well. If your philosophy is to invest actively, these are the options that you have. So first, I'll just give some broad comments. The passive options are in line with their expectations, matching their indices broadly at a low fee. There was a little bit of tracking error coming from the TIPS, the Treasury Inflation Protected Securities option, which is kind of a shorter duration, intermediate duration TIP strategy. Something that we're paying attention to, but not necessarily something that we're highly concerned about at this time. And then moving on down to stable value, you all have already discussed this, but the comment that I would make is there's really no great benchmark for stable value. One of the challenges is this is meant to be capital preservation, and so long as they meet that objective of being able to cash out participants at that stable dollar value, they are largely meeting their objective. But That said, relative to peers, the stable value fund certainly performing well across all time frames. Then moving down to the fixed income fund, really nothing so much to highlight here other than good performance in relative terms across all time frames shown. And then the large cap core equity fund, this one's been a little bit more challenging. However, after a good 2023, 2024 is actually shaping up to be a little bit more difficult year. In relative terms, you see kind of the last year return of 33.7 is about 200 basis points behind the index return. And, I do think that is a reasonable expectation for if we see a period which is kind of rare in markets where equities are up 40% or 35%, to expect your active managers to lag, to some degree. That said, in periods where markets might be down 30%, we would expect your active managers to be able to capitalize off of some of those dislocations. And so just certainly, I think with that perspective, we would expect that. There are some challenges here, though, with the underlying managers. You have Macquarie, which is one of your active managers on watch. No changes to that status recommended. We're going to talk a little bit more about one of the other managers that Callan and staff recommend putting on watch. But overall, we would say if you're looking at the large cap core equity fund offering, there's some characteristics that we note is this option has a lower price to book, a lower price to earnings, and yet a higher expected earnings growth rate. So that generally bodes well for strategies to kind of be valued lower, but yet have higher growth expectations. So, we do remain optimistic that this can ultimately outperform, but just kind of a disappointing period or disappointing window that we're looking at here in this time frame. For international equity, just will mention that, some improved performance. Bailey Gifford has long had an overweight to China that I mentioned earlier, and that certainly helped them capture some of that performance. But improved performance of the last year, still some ways to go to get back ahead net of fees over the 3 and the 5 year time frame. And then finally, I'll wrap up with the small and mid cap equity fund. This is one where 2 of your 3 active managers underperformed over the quarter. There was some improvement going into the last quarter, but just kind of has been some challenges. This is one where this board has had the most change, and there's been more transition. But that said, we like all the managers in here. It's just taking some time to show that improvement here. But no changes recommended. And then finally, as we look at Callan's watch list, I'll jump to page 18 of 44 and just highlight what has changed in the last quarter. Here on Brown Advisory Small Cap, we actually moved the product, the overall, to are more cautionary, and a lot of that has to do with the magnitude of their underperformance. And it's not necessarily anything that they're doing wrong per se. It's just been a very challenging market, unlike some of what they've seen. And they highlight that it's challenging to them for a couple of reasons, in large part due to 2 names within their index that have moved a lot. And I think you all have maybe heard of these, but MicroStrategies and Super Micro represent about 3 to 4% of that underperformance here for Brown Advisory. They just have not owned them. And one is more of an AI play, and then another one is more of a Bitcoin play. And they're used. I think it's Super Micro or MicroStrategies is using a lot of their spare cash to invest in Bitcoin. And it's probably no news as to what has happened with Bitcoin, but just two stocks that they've missed out on, and it has caused relative performance here to suffer. But as it relates to what Brown does for you all, they remain consistent with their philosophy and remain a high conviction manager for Callan. So any questions on performance?
Any questions? Hearing none.
Just one question.
Yes, sir. Yeah, floor.
Yeah, this is Raj Singh. Back on page 3, I just want to make sure I understand the numbers correctly, where the investment fund balances page, the quarter-over-quarter, we started at 16.9 billion and we're at 17.9, and you said the investment return was $1 billion. I just want to make sure the number is that is a fairly significant investment return. I just want to make sure I understand the basis correctly. Page 3.
Yes. Yes. So we put together the net new investment. So these would be the flows out. So you had about 57 million withdrawn from the fund, or from the 401k plan and 457 plan.
Right.
But the investment gains accounted for about $1 billion. So yes, strong results for your participants over the quarter.
Yeah, okay. I just have to reconcile with the other, the Empower report in terms of, I mean, there's slight differences for quarter end numbers on the balance, but those are like a couple of million here and there that I'm sure is a minor issue, but just the returns, I want to make sure they're consistent with the Empower report versus I'm seeing in your report. So appreciate that. If I have further questions,
sure,
I'll follow up. Thanks.
Thank you, Raj. Any other questions? That concludes this report. Okay. You mentioned Brown Advisory. I think Truman Siemens is 98 years old this year. I worked with him at Alex Brown, and he was actually going to fly in to attend this meeting. But he stayed back in Baltimore. So anyway, had a long relationship with Brown Advisory. And so I don't know when his next birthday is, but we want to wish him a happy birthday, whenever that is. World War II veteran. Great investor. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth and Weston. Merry Christmas. Now
yes, Merry Christmas. And
go ahead.
Yes, and just want to say thank you to you, Mr. Treasurer. We certainly enjoyed working with you over the years, and thank you for your trust.
Thank you. Good deal. All right, Chris.
Thank you. It's for this section. Cheryl's going to cover the IPS review and kind of the purpose of it. So essentially every year we take a look at the IPS just to make sure our long-term goals and objectives are still in line, as well as any regulatory or market changes. As a reminder, earlier this year, Empower was able to update our glide path tables. And so the main change that we've made in the IPS, you can go to, I believe it's 26. It's just updating that table. We changed the names essentially of the allocation categories for better understanding that reflects the table. And you can kind of see what they were previously and what they are now. So for example, the new names are going to look very similar to like a target date fund, where the retirement year is going to be the name of the category, rather than previously it was just kind of like a years from pre-retirement and years post-retirement. And then another quick reminder too, with that change, you can see the dark blue section that we're able to actually get 5 additional kind of stages in that glide path that we potentially could utilize, and that's kind of reflected. Other than that change of just adjusting the tables to reflect what actually is happening with the plan. There are no other major changes.
Yeah, and just to clarify and to point out that, those 5 additional categories that we have, we decided to not make any changes at this point in time, but it's something that we could review in the future and make changes to the allocations of those specific groupings. So yeah, it was essentially just a shift in how it's categorized and not a shift in actual asset allocation weightings per target grouping or per year. So it's just more of a shift in how it's processed and how Empower, operationalizes it. So yeah, we made the changes here in the IPS to reflect that accurately.
Any questions?
And there were only a couple other really minor technical and grammatical changes in there, which if you've looked at it, you can see in the red line, but nothing pertinent.
Next.
So I think the board has to vote on that.
I'll make a motion, we approve the changes.
Second. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Charlie Peruse.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
Lanier McRee.
Aye.
James Richardson.
Aye.
Bob Shea.
Aye.
Raj Singh.
Aye.
Steve Beam.
Aye.
And Robert Hillman.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Vote wasn't listed on my sheet. That's why I got confused. Shouldn't be getting confused at this point. All right, so.
It's our fault.
Where am I?
The watch list.
I'm where I thought I was.
Yeah.
Okay, number 11.
Yeah.
Agenda item 11.
2 items on this agenda. I'll let Chris Bird handle both of them. The first one you can, compliance.
These are 2 guys named Chris, by the way, so they have their own show.
Yeah, I'll kind of read this verbatim because it just kind of highlights it. But yeah, there are no prohibited holdings held in the SRP plan during the quarter. BNY Mellon continued daily compliance testing for prohibited holdings identified on the Communist Chinese Military Industrial Companies list, abbreviated CCMC, which is related to the Presidential Executive Order 14032. So again, no SRP investment managers were invested in any of those names on that list. And then finally, the supplemental retirement plan staff continues to monitor investment manager guidelines on a daily basis. And there's nothing material issues that were needed to be reported during the quarter.
So just for the benefit of the new board members, so we have these divestment policies in place due to statute. Statute requires us to divest from certain companies related to Iran, as well as our anti-BDS policies surrounding Israel. So we have, by statute, we have to create a process to divest from any companies related to those. So that's both on the supplemental retirement plan side, as well as the defined benefit, the pension plan. So we have policies and processes in place to handle all that. We hire a third-party vendor to help us create those lists. And then we divest from them per statute if necessary. So just want to make sure folks were aware of what that was.
Okay. He still has one other.
Yep, one other item in. So no questions on that. I guess we can move to the last agenda item, which is the SANS watch list recommendation. So I'll let Chris go into some of the details on that.
Yeah, so I'll kind of touch on the high levels, just kind of give you a quick background of what a watch list is, how do we determine that. But essentially, we look at 3 things when it comes to reviewing managers. We're looking at performance, looking at is the investment philosophy consistent kind of with what they're actually implementing, and then other factors such as the strategy, if there's any large inflows out of the strategy, such as other clients leaving or other clients coming in. And so kind of on those 3 metrics, why we are recommending SANS on that watch list is really two of those: the persistent underperformance against the benchmark and peers, and the significant outflows exceeding expected annual attrition rates. Again, what that really means is we're taking a closer look. We're kind of leaning in, just watching, those items a little bit closer. We still have strong conviction in SANS, and just give you a quick background where SANS fits in the overall portfolio. So they fall as a large cap manager in our large cap white label fund. They make up 18.75% of the strategy, and they couple with another large cap growth manager and two other large cap value managers. The expectation and kind of the approach with SANS performance does involve high tracking error. That is one of our, that is what we do expect. Really what that means, there'll be times where they underperform the benchmark, and then there'll be times where they significantly outperform the benchmark. Strong past performance back in 2017 and 2020 is an example of outperforming. The underperformance, kind of where we're watching closely, is not just 2021, 2022, but year to date. When this came out, I say that when this came out, if we look at SANS performance from October 1st to now, they're up around 14%. The benchmark is up around 5%. So again, one of these times where they're significantly outperforming the benchmark. So our conviction is still there. We're watching those two metrics pretty closely, but other than that, I've visited them 2 months ago, had an on-site manager visit, got to meet the team, got to see the resources, got to have a conversation with kind of all of the heads, not just in investments, but IT, HR. And, my takeaway, they're running a really good shop. One of the initiatives that they're leaning on, which it is a theme in this industry, they're leaning on kind of investing in artificial intelligence from the standpoint of gathering their current data, gathering their current research, and being able to access it quickly and backdate it and compare it to other individual stocks that they may have added to a particular strategy. I feel like they're in a good position because they've been around so long. So, these tools really only work when you already have that analyst putting together those research materials, so you can actually look back into it and kind of compare it to current views. So, yeah, my summary on the SANS, we still have high conviction, watching them closer, and we're continuing to kind of monitor all other managers to the same level of scrutiny.
Yeah, I think just the level of underperformance is more than we would expect. They had a really rough 2021 and 2022. Outperformed pretty significantly in 23, but didn't make up for the underperformance in 21 and 22. And then, as Chris pointed out, year to date through September, they were pretty far underweight the benchmark as well. We've seen that bounce back pretty significantly in Q4 so far, so we're happy to see that and want to continue to see that. But just the sheer amount of underperformance, and it's stretching out over longer time periods now. When you look at like the 3 and the 5 year time period, we feel it's certainly appropriate to put them on the watch list and keep a real close eye on them. So that's kind of leading to kind of our recommendation for adding them to the watch list at this point.
Do we need a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second being made. Any further discussion to accept staff's recommendation? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Aye.
Charlie Peruse.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
Lanier McRee.
Aye.
James Richardson.
Aye.
Raj Singh.
Aye.
And Robert Hillman.
Aye.
Thank you. We're now to our public comment section. I believe we have one person signed up for public comment, Mr. Drew Long. Is he joining us?
I'm here.
Drew, thank you for joining us. And we have a 3-minute public comment section. And thank you for being a public servant, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. Anyway, just wanted to bring something to your attention. So I am a member of the Supplemental Retirement Plan. Earlier this year, I met with my retirement plan counselor and decided that the 457 plan would probably be a better option for me other than a 401k. They requested that I would wait it to after the migration. from the Prudential to the Empower system. Long story short, we in March turned off my contributions coming to 401k and going to 457B. And when we turned them off, I got confirmation in early April they were turned off. And then I had 2 months pay periods where they did not. So I was getting double contributions coming out of my check during April and May paycheck. This was very tough for me. I currently get 20% contributions coming out of my check Roth, which I struggled to pay my bills. During those months, I had to dip into my savings account. I think the major issue there with me was not the fact that this happened, is I didn't have an avenue to call to get help. I probably spent 20, 30 hours on the phone between Empower Help Desk and OSHR. I had to go to my local unit HR person, which told me they did not handle Empower. I told them my situation, that I couldn't pay my bills, and they picked the phone up, and within 6 working days, this person was able to communicate with OSHR, and then they communicate with Empower and had the situation fixed. Kind of forgot about it, and then in October, I got a letter from Empower, and just out of the blue, no email, no correspondence, nothing. And this letter had a ineligible contribution check, and did some digging in that, and they sent me a ineligible contributions check saying that it was the contributions that they took out of my paycheck these 2 periods. It was not. This contribution check was pre-tax money, and everything that I get out was post-tax. Long story short, I just see this as an opportunity for improvement. I'm not complaining at all. But I mean, if we really want this supplemental retirement system to work, it would be nice to have some kind of avenue where the participants in the program can call somebody and get help. Because the first one really, if I hadn't had savings, I couldn't have paid my bills. The second one, my tax accountant says this is going to kill you on taxes. That's pretty much it. I thank y'all for having this. We really appreciate the opportunity to save for retirement, and supplemental retirement is the way to do it. Mr. Treasurer, thank you very much for what you do for all of us.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you for joining us. I've been assured that not only has this been resolved, but measures being put in place to hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody in the future. So
thank you, sir.
Drew. We're now at the end of our agenda. Just have a few closing comments, but before I do so, just want to go around the horn to see if anybody virtually like to say anything in our round robin.
I
Okay.
just want to thank you.
I'd like to say something, Mr. Treasurer.
Oh, hang on just a minute. Go ahead. You have the floor.
This is Lanier, and I just wanted to thank you, Treasurer Falwell, for letting me be a part of this group and for your service to the state as treasurer and before that at the legislature.
Worked with you for 20 years almost. So thank you. Yes, Bob.
Mr. Treasurer, on behalf of your alma mater, UNC Greensboro, Chancellor Gilliam would like to thank you for your service to our state and for your outstanding performance over the course of your career. So thank you very much.
Bob. We still have an undefeated football team, right?
We do.
Good. As a Spartan. So, okay. Anybody else? Treasurer,
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to say that. Go ahead. Somebody's on virtually.
Yeah, Raj Singh. I didn't know you very well, but for the time I've been on the board, very impressed, and I read up on your background. So Treasurer Falwell will miss you. Thank you so much for your service.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yes.
This may be a minute or so.
Okay.
You don't mind.
I need a Kleenex.
I first met the treasurer probably close to 30 years ago. We met, had our first conversation. I actually was thinking about this on the ride over this morning, Dale. I think our first conversation was about 1 o'clock in the morning during a break of the House Appropriations Committee the Monday after Memorial Day, because used to be a lot of late night meetings at the legislature during budget time. And some of them would go all night, some to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And we were having a break, and Representative Falwell at the time, might have been his first term at the legislature. I was at fiscal research on the House Budget Development team at the time, under 30 years old, had a full head of hair, and was running around coordinating stuff. And he grabbed me by the arm, introduced himself to me, and said, "Thank you for what you're doing," because it's legislatures control chaos, especially at 1 o'clock in the morning at a budget meeting. And he said, "I want to talk to you about something at some time." Anybody who knows Dale knows what that means. So I set up a meeting. We set up a meeting with him. And at that point, Representative Falwell was in the minority party, had at that things go, had limited opportunity in certain areas to be involved in things. And he said, "I want to run something by you." And I went and met with him in his office, and we got to know one another, and pulled out a couple Representative Falwell, Treasurer Falwell props, as he's known for, and started talking to me about an issue of that have affected all of us. It was an inefficiency in government around when people pay their DMV bill and registration, there's separate bills for your property tax on your vehicles, and sort of the inconsistency and the complexity around it, and how local property tax systems interact with DMV. And it was a mess. And we talked about it a couple times, and he stayed on it. He said, "Charlie, let's figure out what we can do." Obviously, Representative Falwell took the ball at that time, and a few years later, you now have a consolidated, when you pay your DMV bill, you also pay your property tax bill at the same time. That happened because of Dale. And you remember that?
Oh, yes.
And it just goes to show at that time, and then obviously he's had a long storied career in great public service, and being dogged in things that are common sense, make sense, and help the common people across North Carolina, and has always been an advocate for folks that don't always advocate for themselves, and sort of a common sense approach. Through the years after that, I went to the governor's office. Dale obviously has done many things through the legislature and the executive branch, and now as treasurer. We have had the utmost, I think, admiration for one another, respect for one another. Given our past roles, we didn't always agree or couldn't always agree, but we had very positive dialogue and conversation, and were never disagreeable with one another. And it's been fun working with you, Dale. It really has. And on behalf of the 11.5 million people that call North Carolina home, and as a former state employee and now as a retiree, I just want to say thank you for your service.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was 20 years ago, not 30. And my office was so small that the state-issued desk would not fit in it. So Department of Corrections had to make me a desk to fit in my office, because I'd been assigned to an office so tiny in punishment and retribution from my own party, actually. So when he said we met in our office, my office, part of us were outside in the hallway, but very proud of that. And that legislation was called Moto Tax, and it was the result of listening. I'm not the brains. I'm oftentimes the mule to make this stuff happen. Pete Rada, great tax assessor from Winston-Salem. We were probably one of the few last states to ever do this. I just got word last week, or earlier, our weeks are running together. We have LGC this week. Yeah. So it's got word this week from Kevin Leonard of the County Commissioner Association. That legislation that combines everything in one envelope is
collecting $247 million more this year than it used to. And the irony of that is only 5 million of that goes to the state. So now all those savings are going to counties, cities, volunteer fire departments, period. And some, like our friends in Terrell County, told me during COVID that the only thing that kept them solvent was the tax and tag legislation, because the sales tax revenue had fallen 28% in these low-income counties across North Carolina. So very proud to have worked on that, as well as many other things with you. So thank you for always working with me to save lives, minds, and money for North Carolinians. And it's always meant a lot. So, and thank you for your kind words. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to say one thing. I'm not quite 20, but during that same time period, about 15 years, we met when I was on the state health plan board, and worked with you. You were in the legislature at the time, but I've just known you over that period of time and worked with you, and I appreciate your service to the state, and wish you well in whatever endeavors you plan to take. And I want to know if you're still working on that gig to catch the chairs that the guy's throwing down from the top.
Yes, well, I don't know if Treasurer-elect knows this, but I'm
not the job.
Not for me. Do not raise your hand for this. I'm the personal assistant to the oldest daredevil in the world by name of, his name is the Amazing Slottick. And so he takes these chairs and he stacks them on top of each other. And I will tell you, there are no magnets, there are no pins, there's nothing in these chairs. And I hand him the chairs. And the last chair is handed to him on an aluminum pole that's 24 feet long. And when I'm at the end of that pole, there's only about this much of it sticking out. Because that's how high the chair is. And I got roped into this because sometimes young people don't know about leverage and weight, and how when something gets, over, it can hurt people. And he used to have cheerleaders hand him these chairs, and when he's up there, he cannot look down. So he goes his hands like that, and that chair's got to be there, because if he looks down, he's going to fall. And at Reynolds Auditorium, so last year we did the state girls game, and then the next day at halftime we did the state Duke game, basketball. And in Reynolds Auditorium, when he's up there and he does all this, and I hand him the chairs, and everybody's clapping and everybody thinks it's over. Then he takes the last chair and he turns it to where only two legs of that chair are on the seat of the last one. So there's nothing under it. Then he does a headstand. And I've been racing motorcycles 47 years, and it's 616-year-olds on the track at one time. Nothing scares me quite like this guy does. And so at Reynolds Auditorium, when he did that headstand, the girls' game, his feet were that far from the score. What do you call the score?
The Jumbotron
Yeah, the Jumbotron. And that's how high he was. And so I did the first one of these Wake Forest very quickly. And so you don't practice this. You don't train for it. He gives you a little bit of direction. And he never told me in all of our training that because I just thought he was going to put the chair back on the aluminum pole and hand them back down to me one by one. No, he throws them. He didn't tell me that part, James. And fortunately, I had some motocross gloves on, and I can catch things that are heavy. And because he's up there and he's trying to come back. So that last chair that he just did the headstand on, he just goes like that and like that. And, you got to catch it. So anyway, we've got the High Point game this year, and I'm not sure I can make the Hornets game, but we're doing the Hornets game this year. But if you just watch it on YouTube, it's been on America's Got Talent, and he is crazier than crazier than. So at the end of this, we're down, now we're on the floor at half court, and he cannot do a headstand on the ground after the adrenaline of all that. So I do the headstands. So when we get back down on the ground, I do the headstand, and because he tried to do a headstand in front of Nito Cobain, and he couldn't do it. His adrenaline was is unbelievable. So go YouTube it sometime. Anyway, thank you for those comments. Just very briefly.
Mr. Treasurer, this is Lorraine. I had a comment as well. I also appreciate the many years of service that you've provided to the state of North Carolina, and you have made my experience on this board a good one, a really good one. But what I have appreciated about you the most in these meetings is that you have let debate go on as long as it needed to go. You've never tried to cut it off. You've never tried to cut it short. You've never interrupted anyone. And in my experience with boards and committees anywhere, not necessarily state government, but anywhere, that is rare. And I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you. It helps that you were named after my mother, Lorraine. So.
Oh, thank goodness. And I had not heard your story about your desk. Well, the only one I remember is Nelson Dollar being put in a closet. And I think his first term, and it sounds to me like what he was in was an upgrade from what you were in.
Well, different. We were in our places for different reasons. So anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And to add to the cacophony of thanks for your service, oftentimes public servants, it can be seen as a thankless job. And so thank you very much for your service. I think the other thing I want to thank you for is over the time that I've been on the board, your focus on the people who don't make a lot of money, but still need to save for retirement. And I hope we carry that forward as you step down.
Thank you. With that, just want to thank Tom and staff and Jeff and everybody else. You pick up a 6th sense up here, and I do something with the place cards of not departing members who are no longer on the board. Okay, and without even saying anything, I'm pulling this thing out and I'm signing the stuff, and Tom gets up and goes over and gets the Sharpie because he instinctively knows I'm going to need the Sharpie right on the back of that. So it's been great working with you and Jeff and all the staff who have made all this jump up on the table. Just a couple of quick things going forward. Treasurer-elect Griner, whether it's Prudential turning into Empower, because of your position, you sometimes possibly will get blamed for things that you have no control over. We got, fussed at, why did we choose Empower? Well, somebody else, Prudential chose Empower. So my point is that I think this board has a real responsibility to take ownership of things that we do control and make sure that the things we don't control are running in good stead. So that happens from time to time. Secondly, I want to thank Paul. Paul is the co-chief financial officer in the back. So he's back there making sure things are reconciled properly. We're managing $258 billion here at the Treasurer's office now. And so whether it's retirement or the state health plan or some of our cities and counties that may be in trouble who are not contributing their money to the retirement systems, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on here that doesn't meet the naked eye as far as some of the stresses that some of our communities under. So, Paul, thank you and your team. The other thing is to say to all the new board members and treasurer-elect, you need to say no when no needs to be said. And People don't always care what you know until they know that you care. So those are a couple of little things about have the word no in them. And I say that because this board had the courage, and you should be thankful that it was taken care of before you got here, to dissolve our 403B program. That was a heavy lift. We just could not be great at it. After 8 years, I mean, we're proud of our able board, but after 8 years, the amount of money, after a few years, the amount of money we had in our able product exceeded the amount of money we had on our 403B. We just couldn't be great at it. And in Mecklenburg County, if my memory's right, just in Mecklenburg County, for the school system, there are 8 403B vendors trying to sell them things, teachers and other kinds of folks. So I want to applaud the courage of the board for dissolving our 403B, rolling those people into the 401 and the 457 plan, because we were never going to be great at it. And it made all these meetings a third longer because they each had to have an actuarial report and all this other stuff. And now that's all been resolved. So thank Empower and thank the staff and legal and comms and everybody who made this happen. It was a very big deal. I've joked occasionally a couple of times that when I first got elected, I got 58 Christmas cards in the mail. And then within a year, I only got 3 Christmas cards in the mail. And so I was just looking at this morning. I've got 3 Christmas cards now that I'm leaving the treasurer's office. So we went from 58 to 3, stayed around a dozen or so. Now so far it's back down to 3. So sometimes when you say no and no needs to be said, you don't get Christmas cards in there. So I wanted to thank you for that. And lastly, Jeff's phone went off a while ago, and so in the LGC meeting this week, Angelic wife was in the audience, and her alarm went off too. And I went, "You're out of order." And then I said, that's the only time I think I'll ever be able to say that. And then one of the LGC board members said, "And I think that's going to be the last time you ever say that." So with that, I'd like for you to entertain a motion to close our meeting in honor and Greg Patterson and his long service to our board. And also keep the thoughts of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, and his family and his community in your prayers. United Healthcare used to be one of our major Medicare Advantage vendors to our state retirees. Didn't know him well, but I went by the New York Hilton yesterday, and where he was assassinated. And I say that just to draw attention to the fact that I hope that as we go into this holiday season, that people will take an opportunity to be informed about what's going on in people's lives, not just affirmed by what social media says or what some TV show says. And to understand that December is a very high grief and mental health month, and everybody's going through something. And obviously Brian Thompson, United Healthcare, and the Minneapolis, Minnesota community is obviously going through something because of this. So as you go out and do what you do over the holiday period, I hope that you will remember the concept of the empty place setting. That's a place where somebody used to always sit, and they're no longer there. It's a big part of the grief process. And obviously that's going to affect Brian Thompson's family, his widow, his 2 small children. but it could also be affecting you. There's people in this room who this is the first year without somebody at that Christmas dinner that's been there their whole lives. So just remember that people die twice. Once when their spirit leaves heavenly earth, and the second time is when the last living person says their name or remembers who they were. So in that spirit, just don't be afraid and have the courage to bring up people's names who are no longer sitting there. Because as long as you continue to do that, they continue to live. James, thank you for joining this board, and Charlie, and I'll now, with that, I believe this is my last board meeting.
Unless we're gonna have a special one between now and then, at the end of the year.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting in honor of Greg Patterson. Okay, thank you. And second?
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell for the last time.
Aye.
Charlie Peruse.
Aye.
Lorraine Johnson.
Aye.
Lanier McRee.
Aye.
James Richardson.
Aye.
Raj Singh.
Aye.
And Robert Hillman.
Aye.
Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Happy holidays.